Hi, I'm Matt. I play Captain Reid on The Adventures of the Spellbound, and this week is my closing narrative for the finale of the series. This is the last narrative that I'll write for Reid, and takes place sometime after the events of the final episode of the campaign. This is him emotionally wrapping up the baggage that he's got left, and takes care of some loose ends that he needed some time to deal with on his own. So, I hope you enjoy it. The warm air washed up from the shallow sea of Cyan over Reid like a warm blanket. Reid sat in his chair and his boots dug into the sand, and he stared out at the emerging stars in the death wails of the sunset. 2 fresh grave markers glowed gently to his right. The solar-powered holographic displays shined perfect holograms of Yuri and Bill, both smiling, sneering, and laughing. The crash of the waves against the coast was like a lullaby, and Reid tipped his flask up and took a pull from it. The sweet Terran whiskey was as smooth as water. "I made it, Bill," he said out loud. "Not bad for a human, right?" He choked out, somewhere between a cough and a laugh. "You know, even though you kept up your end of the deal with Mom, going out like that without permission, that was insubordination. I could fire you for that," Reid said, his serious tone starting to give way to a broken voice full of anguish and brokenheartedness. Reid felt his eyes grow hot. He yawned and grunted, suppressing the feelings. He hadn't cried like that since the day they were last here, when a stone nap had nearly cost him everything, including his life. Something had broken inside him that day. He had lost a little piece of himself that he had never found again. It was almost like having tethers that tied his heart to his head cut and separated forever. He had taken a silent oath in that moment that he would never devote himself so fully to someone else that he could feel that way ever again. It had taken him a long time and a lot of effort to work through what was going on inside him, but he was at peace, finally. "You know, words fail sometimes, Bill," Reid said as the first tear rolled down his cheek. "Sometimes, what someone means to us escapes depiction. Sometimes you feel like you're so connected to someone that if they were to die, you feel like you would die with them. You start to feel unsure if life would even be worth living if they weren't by your side. You were that person for me, Bill. And when the shock of what happened to the Void bitch wore off, it took me a long time to come to terms with it. But at the end of the day, you gave your life for what you believe was right, regardless of what anyone else may think." Reid wept, and the tears steadily fell down his face. He uneasily lit a spiced cigarette and took a drag. "You told me throughout our time together that no matter what ship had it painted on the hull, that I was the Spellbound to you. But the real truth was that the Spellbound was that unshakable, unbreakable, absolute loyalty and love that you showed for me and my family. And that's the kind of debt that's unrepayable. So I retired that name today, so it can rest with you. We're the Cursebreaker now. It seemed fitting, since you gave your life to cast a spell, and that I should spend the rest of my life to break that curse on Moraine. That's my gift to honor you, buddy." Reid stared out at the setting sun, and it felt like an eternity passed as he finished the sweet cigarette. He looked over at the now glowing holograms of Yuri's grinning face. "I'm sorry, Yuri. I should have listened to Bill when he told you to take me with you. But there's no way I could have known what he was going to do. Otherwise, I would have stopped him myself. I hate that your life was snuffed out as part of that choice. You deserved better than that. Better than I could have given you. You were truly part of the crew, and one of the few that I could call one of my very best friends. I hope that you find all of the ale and the happiness you deserve on the other side of the veil, my friend." Reid tipped up his flask, pointed it toward the sky. "To Brion, Father Charles, Raphael, and hell, even Caliban, thank you for your sacrifice and your service, and may the verse and the veil shine in your favor." Reid pulled another long shot from the flask and finished it. Reid sat on the beach and watched the sun for a long time, until all that was left was the black of the sky and the reflection of the stars in the sea. His eyes grew heavy, and eventually sleep would take him. He drifted off right there on the beach next to the memory of his fallen crew. Reid awoke the next morning to a chime in his ear, and it took a moment to realize that he had fallen asleep on the beach. A little hungover and a little disoriented, he answered the call. "Yeah," Reid answered groggily. "Captain, I know you said not to disturb you while you were at the beach, but there's an encrypted call for you from the ship. They say it's urgent," a female Aslan voice said. Reid's senses snapped to attention, and the lingering hangover was pushed to the back of his mind for now. "Jade, can you patch it to me here?" "Yes, Captain. I'm patching you in now." "Hey, kid, how's it going?" "Raphael, is that you?" Reid said, the tension in his shoulders loosening with a soft laugh. "I've been better, you bourbon thief," Reid teased. "Listen, kid, I shouldn't be making this call, but I consider it a professional courtesy, considering I am where I am because I was on your boat when we landed where we did," Raphael stuttered. "I'm calling you to give you a heads up that in about 12 hours, there's going to be a hit that goes out on you. And I don't mean a hit, I mean the hit." Reid considered the words before he replied. What are the conditions? And how much is it? And who would issue a hit on me?" Reid asked, making sure his tone was level. 50 million dead. Triple if alive," Reid replied flatly. "Fucking Christ. Who's got that kind of cash to throw at a nobody like me?" Reid cursed. "Reid, it's Kyle and Cisco. It's Nora's brother," Raphael replied, with a little bit of sympathy in his voice. "Shit," was all Reid managed to get out. "It's not everything," Raphael said. "Kylan's also putting up half the money for the reward. The other half's been put up by Moraine Pharmaceuticals." Reid's blood ran cold, and that little ball of anger in his chest flared to life as his blood pressure spiked. "Novak. Reid, in a few hours, you're going to become the most wanted man in the verse. This is the biggest private bounty ever offered in history, to my knowledge. Every privateer, the corsair, bounty hunters, private security, everybody is going to be aiming at you. In addition to some private parties, I'm sure, and I'm not excluded from this," Raphael said. "I appreciate the heads up, old man. We're even now," Reid said, ice in his voice. "Run, Reid. If you got friends or favors, now's the time to call them in. Get as far away from this place as you can. I could call a guy," Raphael said, but Reid cut the call. "Jade, recall the crew. Warm up the Cursebreaker. I want us out of atmosphere as soon as possible," Reid ordered. "Aye, Captain," Jade replied. Reid stood up and gathered himself. He took one last look at the two grave markers and put his hat on his head. "Looks like I might be joining y'all sooner rather than later," Reid said, as he made his way toward the trail that led back to the landing pad. Just as Reid crossed the side of the beach and made for the trailhead, a voice called out from it. "He talked about this place that night," a rough female voice echoed. Reid stopped and looked. He knew that voice. The Shy stepped out onto the beach. Her toned and semi-muscular form looked well taken care of. The combat boots and short go-go skirt with the leather and short halter top hugged every inch of her perfectly. Her short cropped pixie haircut was dyed black, and she had a couple of new tattoos. She had a large heart on her chest with the initials NC in bold letters, which Reid could only assume stood for Nora Cisco. She also had a set of bear paws on either of her cheeks, just below her eyes. Reid froze as he saw the weapon she was carrying. A full carbon fiber and titanium custom-made laser minigun built specifically for her size, with a small backpack in the shape of a sugar skull that served as a power pack. The gun was as tattooed as she was, sporting Ursine tribal war paint. He learned about the paint as part of his research for the culture to give the big bear his proper burial. But some of his best and worst times were spent here, Reid said as he noticed the safety switch was off and the priming LED was ready on the weapon. His right hand slowly drifted to the judge at his waist. "Where's her grave?" a Shy said with grief in her voice. She wasn't mine to bury, Reid said. Shy, I know what it might look like to you, but I swear, I didn't have any idea what Bill... But Reid didn't have a chance to finish his words. She turned the weapon to him and squeezed the trigger. Superheated beams of light streaked out from the rotating barrels as Shy screamed a death wail of mourning and pain. It sounded like she had waited a long time for this. Reid dove to the ground and took cover behind some rocks next to the trailhead. Bright streaks of death kissed the morning air over his head, each hotter than the surface of a sun. The trees and foliage around the trailhead burst into flames as they were struck by the lasers. The air cracked as the oxygenated atmosphere swam with octane from each bolt. Come out, coward! Come out and die with some goddamn balls! Die like they did! She wailed. Not on your life, cunt, Reid said to himself, drawing his weapon. After what felt like an eternity of suppressive fire, Reid heard the thermal coils expose themselves on the weapon to begin rapid cooling. He had 3, maybe 4 seconds before she could pull the trigger again. He bounded upward out of cover and looked in horror as he leveled his weapon. She had dropped the minigun and now trained a hand cannon on him. She looked at him with a grin and eyes that lacked all sanity as she squeezed the trigger. The weapon barked with a thunderous clap. The oversized round tore a flaming path through the air and grazed Reid's scalp, removing the hat from his head. Reid squeezed off a round. The shot struck her in the left collarbone. The wound instantly bloomed into a bloody flower of cauterized flesh and shattered bone. Shy howled in pain, but she didn't lose her focus, and Reid's comms chattered to life. Move! Run! I can handle her, Nina said. 3 of my men are in body bags thanks to her. This is personal. Reid had never been more glad to hear the Earthsign woman's voice. Gunfire from a full squad of PDF troopers erupted from the trees. Shy scowled in a pained frustration and took cover. Reid saw his chance had bolted from the cover of the trees in the trailhead. He scooped up his hat, not looking back, in a full sprint and exited the battlefield. And Reid, Nina added, don't return. Death follows in your wake, and I've had my fill of it. Yes, ma'am, Reid replied, and didn't let up until the cursebreaker was under his feet. Jade gunned the engines and the ship broke for space. As it did, Reid's comms crackled to life. This isn't over, Reid. I'll find you. Watch your back, you And Shy's voice faded to static from the extreme range. After a few moments, Jade's soft voice asked, Where are we going, Captain? Reid jumped, surprised by the breaking of the silence. He considered for a moment. He had business to address with his crew about loyalties and money before most things. But, he said, set a course for the closest gas giant. Make a scooping run for some gas, he replied. After that, call a meeting for the crew in the cargo bay. Tell them to lock up their weapons before they come. Aye, Captain, Jay replied dutifully, thankful to have purpose. Reid looked out into the star-speckled void and sneered that boyish grin that he had buried all those years ago. It looked like the universe was coming back to test its mettle again, but at least it wouldn't be boring. Reid held his hand with the index finger pointed outward and his thumb upward in the shape of a gun. He mimicked the recoil with a smile. He said to himself. Thank you if you took the time to listen to the whole video. I appreciate it. I might have had some hiccups in there, but it's okay. It's a long script and I did my best. If you got anything out of it, please leave a comment below. Let us know how we're doing. If you want to see more of these videos, I'll be happy to hear you out. So feel free to send us a message here on Facebook or any of our socials. Thank you for your time. We appreciate you.